The Road to War. Written and narrated by John Miro. Get more at servingworlds.com. 10. You taking notes, Bone? D'Angeri teased the kid over the open line. Jake raised his eyebrows. Just like that, Bowen was Bone. Jake had a feeling the handle would stick around, just so long as the private first-class Bowen did. Danger's suit popped a replacement clip out of his own ammo feeder. The soldier demonstrated ejecting a clip from the tri-cannon mounted on his right arm, catching the full round easily with the same hand, then slammed the now empty chamber on the bottom of his weapon over the clip sticking out of the toaster. The gun whined as it fed itself the first few rounds. On screen, Danger watched Bowen try again, this time cleanly reloading his weapon from the new supply of clips Danger had put in his ammo feeder. "Yeah, now you're packing," he said encouragingly. "Stop flirting, Danger," came a bored female voice from the left of Bowen. That would be Wicker. Corporal Tabitha Wick, leader of the other fire team assembled. Bones his name, not his occupation. Several other soldiers snickered on the open line. "All right, settle," Sergeant Jake Grunt Garner ordered, ignoring the laugh in his own voice. The team channel obligingly quieted down. Jake waited. He hated waiting. He hated it so much, he decided he'd even prefer talking to the platoon's pilot. He clicked open a private channel to the sole occupant of the VTOL dropship hiding behind a building to his left. "I hate sitting here while Paladin and Ghost have all the fun." Jake understood the plan, but he'd rather be up there doing his part. "Fun? Yeah, right, fun." Pilot Willard Sue slung the words fast. "Those lucky bastards are about to have all the fun. Every single explosive round of fun." "They'll be fine," Grunt responded, in a more playful voice than most of his troops would suspect he was even capable of making, especially to Lieutenant Willard Sue, call sign Angel, the pilot of the dropship. "Ghost and I worked it out." Jake felt a rumbling through his mechanized suit and craned his head around to peer up through the blue-tinted crysteel of his helmet. He had to lean into the sudden rotor wash from the dropship, suddenly hovering in the air above him. He unconsciously raised his head to protect his face from whipping dust and trash. Even after more than a year in a mech suit, he sometimes had that reaction. "I knew it!" the high-pitched voice shouted. "What's the plan?" Jake dropped his hand with a scowl, equally unconscious of the precisely balanced servos and mechanical system which kept his 600-pound military suit from falling over with every movement he made. Willard Sue. He'd been a pain in Jake's ass since long before they met Li Zhong. In public, neither missed an opportunity to rip a strip off the other. Their dislike for each other was already legendary throughout the fledgling ICR. Although Jake had to admit, Sue had hauled his ass out of hot zones less capable pilots would have never attempted, and he was family. As Willard and his sister Elena, she of the bad taste in men, never failed to remind him. Jake dragged his hand back towards Government Row. In response to his brain's impulses, the mechanized suit bowed in imitation of a maitre d' as if pointing his way to the finest table. "By all means, buzz on over and provide support, Toothpick. I'll send in some privates to sweep up your privates later on." "Just tell me." The craft dipped its nose in Jake's direction. "We both know you're going after Lee. If I'm not there to fly your ass out and you get crispy, I'll be sleeping on the couch for a—" It was an old joke between them. It had been funnier months ago, before Gov caught Elena hiding rebels in the basement of their restaurant and sentenced her to espionage. At least she was still alive, behind bars in a prisoner of war camp. Or had been, the last Jake and Sue had heard. Jake whipped around to face the towers again. "We got babies here. You might have to fly out on the double. Besides, one of us has to be around when Elena gets out." Willard Sue registered his displeasure by killing the channel and slamming Jake with a little backwash as he flew the dropship back to its original position. The tri-cannons on both Jake's arms spun up in response to the spike of his emotions. He buried it all, the fear, the helplessness, and the guilt. The anger he let ooze up, he'd use it against the Earthers. "Let's go, Lieutenant," Jake growled. "Get this party started." "Nothing works." The tech slammed his fist into the monitor. "Whoever fragged our comms planted this infection months ago, maybe years. It's gotten into everything." Earth Forces Captain Noelle Carson rubbed the bridge of her nose in frustration. The day before, every comms channel had gone dead, and every image and file had morphed into indecipherable modern art. She took in her reflection in the dusty monitor. Her uniform was still crisp, despite her being in it for 3 days. Even under the harsh field lights lighting up the room, the rose power grid had failed weeks back. Her brown skin shone with health. After weeks assigned to command, her shaved scalp bore no trace of interface crown marks, or of how badly she itched for a shower. Her pale blue eyes remained bright and clear, though she hadn't slept for days longer than she'd worn the same uniform. "How long for just audio?" "You kidding?" the junior lieutenant shrieked, then gulped. He dug his palms into his eyes. His movements were jerky, frantic. "Sorry, Captain Carson. The worm keeps mutating and propagating, and I can't even guess right now." Noelle nodded coolly and dismissed the tech. She stepped closer to the monitor, watching a garbled stream of white text scroll through a jumbled image file. The monitor still swayed from the tech's blow. She reached out and stilled it. "Something's coming," she told her image in the monitor. Her gut told her the fleas were planning a big offensive, but she couldn't say that out loud. Not without intel, not without a plan. She was an officer, and there was too much panic already chasing this mobile command center that moved daily around the outskirts of Government Row, from floor to floor and from tower to tower as the rebels marched closer and closer. The timing was getting desperate on both sides. A poke in the eye, like this morning's attack, didn't mean anything on its own, but both sides knew the convoy was due. Both sides knew the odds would whip back into Gov's favor as soon as it got here. She tapped the screen. It didn't even respond to her touch. "Deaf, dumb, and blind," she whispered. In the early days, she'd felt sympathy for the Reachers, had her own questions about the land grabs, the raft of laws limiting people's movements and associations. That was before an avalanche of terrorism and impossible demands, before the cowardly hit-and-run tactics on Gov supply convoys desperately trying to shore up the cities when the agricultural communities united with the sand fleas against Earth. She'd protected convoys herself, demonstrating skills that promoted her to the front lines, skills that had kept her alive while other soldiers fed Reach's sand with their blood. When the Reachers hit the platform just now, she'd longed to crack a window and tear a strip off the idiotic commander on the ground. The fool had committed twice as many resources as the Reachers' swipe had taken out. They didn't have those kind of resources, which was probably why the commander had put them in, to avoid looking weak. Noelle didn't like to bluff. A quick glance around her showed nobody was watching. She closed her eyes and sagged, forehead almost touching the monitor. When she'd first been summoned to the Row, she'd been proud that surviving a year defending Southreach had counted for something. She'd been grateful, on behalf of the soldiers she'd served with, that Gov's new military commander was ready to listen to seasoned soldiers about how to hold what little ground Gov still controlled in Southreach. Commander Winter was that rare soldier that reached senior leadership without losing the ability to recognize good advice when he heard it. Perhaps that was because his predecessor had died before his time, when his fluid-filled lungs lost the battle with Reach's low barometric pressure and drowned him from the inside. And his predecessor's predecessor had been blown up by the Reachers, as had that man's predecessor. Whatever the reason, Winter had come to rely on Noelle for the unvarnished truth. Her captain's bars and a permanent post as his advisor in Government Row were her reward, or if you knew her well enough to ask her off duty, her curse. Her father, the general, had raised her to execute, not point out stupid to senior officers who ought to know better. Some days Noelle thought the paper cuts she got filling reports hurt more than all her battlefield injuries. "Hold it together, Ivy," Noelle told herself, using the name her squad mates had given her on her first training mission after sign-up. Back before the rebellion, when Gov meant Gov for everyone. Before Reachers turned on Earthers and a career soldier with plans of shipping out with the Marines on the next convoy discovered her Gov needed her right there at home. Some days she wished her father had lived to see what kind of soldier she'd become. Most days, she was glad General Brock Carson, retired, had died peacefully in his garden soon after the stroke took his wife Haley. It would have broken both their hearts to see their adopted home ripped apart in civil war. "Pack that up, Noelle." She could almost hear the general say those words. "You got a job to do, girlie," she murmured aloud, straightening up and tugging on the bottom of her uniform jacket. The next fold convoy was almost here. It was up to her to keep Government Row and its commander safe until the cavalry made its dramatic last-minute arrival. Afterwards, as soon as Gov had the troops to push the Reachers out of South Reach City, she'd find her way back to her unit. She'd sock someone in the mouth if that's what it took to get back to real soldiering, she thought, and she felt a cocky grin slide back into place. Her internal clock told her it was about time to provide Commander Winter with an update. By habit, she automatically double-checked with her wrist, but that screen was networked too and displayed only pixelated foobar. She walked back to the window. The plaza was quiet again. She paced in front of the useless monitors. Damn it, she had nothing to tell Winter until the ground forces sent up a situation report. Where were they? A dozen stories below, one soldier races up the tower. Not half a kilometer away, Li Zhang watches through a sniper scope, waiting to connect the dots. You have been listening to Reach, The Road to War. Written and narrated by John Miro. Music, All This by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. Hear more of the story at ServingWorlds.com. Thank you for listening.